Welcome to the View from the Inside podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Richardson. Welcome to episode number 4. And for those of you that have listened to our first 3 podcasts, I want to thank you so much for that support. We tried to give you our origin story. We tried to explain to you what it's like to be a client at Tactical Wealth Management. And then we also wanted to give you a feel for who we deal with. And we got that done, and I'm so excited about this 4th podcast because now we get to pivot and really try to execute on our goal, which was to bring great guests to the podcast, people that are part of my network after being a financial advisor for 23 years and a broadcaster for San Jose State football for the last 17 years. And we're trying to fuse business, markets, sports, and just overall great people. And this first guest hits the bullseye. I'm so fired up to have Andrew Phillips on the podcast. He's a guy that I've been a stalker and a lurker. I'll be honest, Andrew, watching your stuff on LinkedIn and on social media, and of course, watching your career as a football player at Stanford. I know I called a couple of games for San Jose State when you were playing at Stanford, but to give you the introduction, this guy's a Stanford grad, majored in the classics, ancient history, just for fun, right? Gets the master's degree at University of Virginia, and while he's there, spends some time studying abroad in China, because that's just what we do. And at Stanford, he was a 3-year starter in football. His teams went to 2 bowl games. They beat Virginia Tech in the Orange Bowl in 2011. And were ranked number 4 in the country when all the dust settled. That's so cool to think about in today's college football playoff stuff. Right now, he's a sales leader for LinkedIn. 900 million users worldwide. They're going to be to a billion users here by 2025. He's an expert in this thing called LinkedIn. If you're an Xer like me, you're thinking about what color's your parachute, the old Bowles book that taught you how to go get a job, and LinkedIn has kind of taken that over. And then I would also say, if you're tuned into this podcast because you picked us up via social media and you're a college student athlete, while you're listening to this podcast, I want you to go directly to LinkedIn. I want you to find Andrew Phillips, and I want you to sign up for his college athletes LinkedIn playbook while we're talking. I have that much conviction around what this guy has created. He's the author of that. And again, just a guy that so much like a lot of Stanford guys that I run into. What a great CV that Andrew has. And he probably hasn't done his best work yet, quite frankly. So with that being said, Andrew, man, thanks so much for being on podcast number 4 of the old View from the Inside. Thank you.
Oh, of course. No, it's a thrill and happy to be here. And just I hate to correct my host in the first 30 seconds of speaking, but LinkedIn actually passed 1 billion members earlier this year. So fun fact. Yeah. And we'll get into LinkedIn stuff, but we're adding 5 members a second, which is just kind of fun math to play in your head. You sit there and drone off 5 members. So it's still growing like crazy, but did pass 1 billion members. And then for anybody on the athlete side, we'll get into this as well. But if you go to getathleteplaybook.com, rather than having to wade through LinkedIn and try to find me, getathleteplaybook.com takes you straight to it. You can sign up for it. It's 5 emails of the best advice that I've come up with in 10 years of working at LinkedIn and how to use it as a tool, which we'll get into as well. But getathleteplaybook.com.
Yeah, and if you're not a college athlete, hang in here on this podcast because all of this stuff works. It's an amazing look at LinkedIn and the power of LinkedIn, and we're also going to hear a lot about a guy that showed up at Stanford and did something really special as a student athlete, if you will. We're kind of into these origin stories on this podcast. We did that on podcast number 1 for Tactical Wealth Management and my journey. Let's do that with you. So high school athlete, Georgetown prep, back in the DC area. You're a football player, obviously, because that's what you end up doing in college. Were you just a football guy, or did you play multiple sports? And from what I gather, watching you over the years, you've always been a serious student, I think, right?
Well, no. So yeah, grew up in the DC area. Both my parents worked for different members of Congress over the years, and the joke in our family was my dad worked for Senator Ted Stevens from Alaska. My mom didn't want to move to Alaska. My mom worked for Rudy Boschwitz from Minnesota. My dad didn't want to move to Minnesota, so they just fought about it for 15 years, and raised a bunch of kids in the DC area. But grew up in DC. Was multiple sport athlete. I played lacrosse for a bit. Played basketball my freshman year. My Georgetown Prep's a serious lacrosse school, and it has been a hotbed for lacrosse. And I think my senior year, if I have this right, I want to say, because there's 10 guys who play at a time, and I want to say we sent 12 or 15 guys Division One. So played until my sophomore year, and it was on the football track, but lucky enough to play on some really good teams. And fortunately for me, in terms of origin story, my freshman year I ended up starting on varsity, and we had a guy who had broken many of the Maryland rushing records, a guy named Marcus Mason, just a fantastic running back. Ended up winning the Walter Payton Award at Youngstown State, actually as a running back after starting in Illinois. Just an incredible athlete and an incredible guy to watch and have the opportunity to block for. And that effectively, in the pre-social media era in terms of high school football recruiting, I think Rivals had just come out in maybe 2003 or 4 or something like that. And I was a 06 graduate. So thankfully for me, Marcus was breaking points, touchdowns, and yards records for the state of Maryland. And, coaches would come watch him, and my high school coach would get asked, okay, well, you've got this freshman starting a tackle. What's going on? So that was, thankfully how I was able to get on some radars, and then ended up at Stanford because, that's a story in itself. But yeah, grew up in the DC area, and yeah, just locked in on football. I also, in addition to doing multiple sports, I was involved in drama. So I did 3 productions in high school. Juror number 3 in 12 Angry Men was probably my proudest feat on the stage. Really enjoyed it. And I saw a Twitter thread the other day that just, got me thinking about this. But the skill sets that you lean into doing any kind of dramatic art, I found to be really profound. And I didn't do speech and debate, but if I had, I'd imagine it'd be a very similar skill set. But very grateful for those skills as well. We had this amazing woman who had done some time on Broadway and just really knew what she was doing, that ran the theater department at Prep when I was there. So yeah, great time growing up in DC area, and 3 brothers. One is still living there with his wife. One just moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and one is now in London pursuing his master's. But yeah, that's me.
And I got to believe, with your size and strength, there probably weren't coffee tables that lasted too long in the household. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. Well, tell me about this recruiting thing. So did you have multiple offers out of high school? And I always love asking the Stanford guys this. Did you know it was, once Stanford came around, were you on board right away? Or were you a guy like me where you're saying, gosh, I really want to go to UCLA. That doesn't happen. And then the best thing ever that happens to me is I get that offer to go play at Stanford. Yeah. What was it for you?
So it's a funny story. So I grew up, my mom's cousin was on the Eric Parseghian, Dan Devine, Notre Dame, Rudy team. Literally, he's on the team where they carry Rudy off the field. So I grew up Irish Catholic family, big Notre Dame guy. It's shameful now to look through like these shoe boxes of pictures, and I've got like leprechaun hats, and I went to a couple of games. We had a neighbor who was a big supporter of the program, so we went with him to a few games. And I'm hook, line, sinker bought in on like, okay, this is exactly what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to graduate from a Jesuit high school. I'm going to go to Notre Dame. I'm going to go to the NFL. This is the path. And the first touch of Stanford, funny enough, is I'm on a Notre Dame recruiting trip. And this must have been 2004, if I have it right. And because it was Ty Willingham's first year. and either '03 or '04. And Stanford goes in, and Evan Moore, my brother is with me, who ended up being a tight end at Virginia. And Evan Moore goes off this game. And my brother's watching Evan Moore with these big eyes going, who is this guy? Right. And look up, if you haven't seen Evan Moore's tape. I mean, the guy was 6'7", catch anything, fantastic route runner, and he had an incredible game that game. So that was the first little inkling of like, wow, okay, Stanford football. And they lost a close. It was Walt Harris's first year. I want to say they lost a 20-10 or 27-10. Like a little overmatched, but like showed up talent wise in a way that definitely got my brother's attention and got my attention as well. I was really focused on East Coast or east of the Mississippi at least. And the sequence of events that leads to Stanford is Ty Willingham gets fired. And he had obviously come from Stanford, and he had taken a bunch of Stanford coaches out. John McDonnell, who was his offensive line coach at Notre Dame, then and was with him at Stanford, goes back to Stanford. And he sends me a note saying, hey, I know you've been very public about wanting to be east of the Mississippi, but I'm back at Stanford now. Would love to have you come check us out. And I tell my dad, I'm like, this McDonnell, you remember from Notre Dame, he's now at Stanford. He wants me to look. My dad was a telecom lawyer, so he worked for a bunch of different. He worked for Comcast, Yahoo, as a lawyer and lobbyist for over the years. And he was going to be attending a tech conference in San Francisco like that spring. And so he says, hey, okay, so I'm going to be put up in this cool hotel. I was just going to go by myself for a day or two. Let's make a weekend of it. We'll go check out spring practice. I'm making you look, was his quote. Like, you don't have to go. It's really far away, but I'm making you look. And then, anybody associated with Stanford has that feeling. You pull off El Camino Real into Palm Drive, and my eyes get as big as dinner plates seeing this place. I'm going, oh my God, what is this? Right? It's 72 degrees and sunny, and rest is history. From then, I was after that visit, I was dead set. This is exactly where I want to go. And thankfully, didn't have to spend springs and summers in South Bend, and got to spend them in Palo Alto.
I love that. So you come in as a freshman, 2006. That was the last year of Walt Harris, if memory serves me correct. So yeah. Rough year, 1-11. And Stanford makes a change. So they hired Jim Harbaugh. Of course, everybody knows Jim just won the national title at Michigan, took over as the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. That still sounds weird for me to say out here in California. And so that's good. We can talk a lot about Jim, but he also brings in an offensive line coach. And while we're trying to go worldwide with this podcast, we're Monterey County based with Tactical Wealth Management. And there's a guy named Chris Dahlman that comes in as the offensive line coach under Jim Harbaugh. So you get to play for Chris for a couple of years. And for the locals, most guys know Chris. He played at Stanford. He and I overlapped 1 year. I was older than him. Of course, he played for the Niners forever and then coached for the Atlanta Falcons. And if memory serves me correctly, he was coming back from Atlanta.
Correct.
He'd been let go there, and he goes to work for Stanford. How was that playing for Chris Dahlman?
The most foundational and fundamental coaching experience of my life, in a sentence. Wow. Hands down, the best coach I've ever had. And I had some great ones. I mean, you look at the Chargers staff now, we had Greg Roman, and this isn't a comparison game, but the impact that Chris Dahlman had on my life is something I can't really even put into words. But commanded respect the instant he walked in the room. Guys won Super Bowls with the 49ers. He's played our position at our school, gets Stanford, loves Stanford. An incredible teacher, which is unsurprising given that he's now, he's made his profession as a teacher, and teacher and administrator for Palma and everything that he's doing. But just really, really knew how to teach the game and knew how to teach young men, all the things that come with developing as a football player. And I wasn't commonly reading or seeking out our coaching staff scouting reports or the press clippings or anything like that, but I did find one randomly that I wasn't even really looking for. But it was Coach Harbaugh talking after a spring period where I was in the hunt to be a starter. And somebody asked a question about development of the offensive line. And he said something like, oh, gosh, you look at our roster, and a year ago, a bunch of these guys weren't players. And he goes specifically, Andrew Phillips, whoa, guy was not a player. I'm just like, hey, coach, like, come on. But he said something which I give him a ton of, that I echo tremendously, which is credit Chris Dahlman with that, because, Andrew had the skills, he had the know-how, he had the determination, but it was just an extra bit of form and technique and adapting to the Pac-10 that Chris got him ready for in a year and a half. And, incredibly true. Just an incredible teacher, and somebody I'll never be grateful enough for.
Well, so my only regret is that he didn't recruit you, because when I asked Chris about his coaching at Stanford, I always want some insight around football, scheme, Harbaugh, whatever. And he'll always talk about recruiting Sam Swartzstein. And for the listeners who don't know Sam, a little bit younger than Andrew, played center, and was from Texas. And so whenever I ask Chris about his days coaching at Stanford, all he talks about is recruiting Sam Swartzstein because his mom made the best chili down in Texas, right? Nothing else matters. So that's some great insight on Chris. I appreciate that story. So you become a starter in 2008. So it's basically your third year on campus. I always like diving into this question. That's when you feel like you kind of break through as a college athlete, right? You went there to start. That's the goal, and win games, right? When did you know that you were going to be a starter? When was that breakthrough or aha moment for you?
I think it was actually the prior year, because I was backing up. I was basically the Swiss Army knife utility backup for the interior three for most of the season in 07, which we go 4-8, but in terms of relative success, we beat SC and Cal in the same year, including the big 41-point dog upset down at the Coliseum. Top 5 core memory of my life, and was backing up among those 3 players a guy named Michael Brewer, who actually went down with an ankle injury the first play of the fourth quarter. So I played the whole fourth quarter. My first play of that game was we're on like the 6-inch yard line, and LA Coliseum I think I'm like 4 seconds late off the ball. You can watch the film and everybody takes off, and I'm at left guard. I haven't left my stance yet. So I think it was the big game in 07 when I really knew, okay, I can handle this, because I ended up starting big game. It was my first start. Like I said, we go 4-8, but we end the year with the axe and having beat SC, pretty good year. Following year, lost. Just so many close, disappointing ones. Lost to UCLA on the road. They, drive the last second to win the game. Lose to Oregon State, and one that got away from us. Actually, no, we beat Oregon State that year. I'm thinking of a different year, but lose to Oregon at Oregon that year in a game that we should have won. So yeah, kind of a rough year, but personally as a player, I knew I still had a lot to develop. I wasn't out there dominating my first year as a starter by any means, but I knew, okay, I had arrived enough to be able to really contribute at Pac-10 level.
So you break through, you're a starter, and you guys start to build something totally special. As a Stanford fan, former Stanford player, football broadcaster, got to roll in and see you guys play the Spartans in 08 and 09, and man, you could just see the thing start to build. So you guys go 8-5 in 09. You go to the Sun Bowl. Toby Gerhart, right? Isn't he your running back in that year? And then 2010, man, it all comes together, right? 12-1. 10 wins in football. I always say this as a broadcaster and a fan. That's the holy grail, man. When you win 10 games, I don't care if it's at Lakewood High School or at Stanford or in the pros, you've had yourself a year. You guys go 12-1. You beat UCLA 35-0. I believe that was – were you guys on the road for that one, or were you at home for that one?
Second or third game of the year, yeah. It was down in the Rose Bowl. I want to say it was, second or third game of the year. But
so you shut them out. At Notre Dame, you win there 37-14. Beat USC at home 37-35. Andrew Luck with maybe the best tackle I've ever seen a quarterback make when he lights up Sharice Wright, who does the scoop and run.
Yeah.
I had to watch that this morning just to get in the mood for this podcast. And then you just put it on Virginia Tech, 40-12 in the Orange Bowl, end up number 4 in the country. I guess this would be my Jim Harbaugh question. What were the top 2 things that you guys were doing as a team to get here? Because it just was like a freight train that started to roll, and it just got better and better and better.
I think it was a couple of things. First of all, you can't talk about our rise to success in that era without talking about Shannon Turley, who was our strength and conditioning coach. Very unconventional, very very contrarian in his approach, very specific in his expectations, very demanding, but the exact thing that we needed, because the problem with Stanford success in football, or the challenge with Stanford success in football, is that depth is always going to, as had been historically, a huge issue. You lose a guy like Andrew or a guy like Toby in that 2009 season, for example, and that's a different year, right? We don't have Andrew for the Sun Bowl. If we don't have Toby during his Heisman run, which, by the way, just given the opportunity, I've lost respect for the Heisman Trophy, just because if you're going to take Christian McCaffrey, if you're going to take Andrew Luck, I can take Andrew losing it to Cam Newton. I can even take I think it was ridiculous, but I can take him losing it to RG3.
Right.
You're going to take it from Toby, who has more yards, touchdowns, and points than the guy who ends up winning it. You're going to take it from Christian McCaffrey, that breaks Barry Sanders' all-time yards record. But again, we're not here to talk about the Heisman Trophy. So you have to talk about Shannon Turley for sure. And then there's just this attitude, and I don't know how else to describe it other than to tell a few stories, like this turning a bunch of nice guy, gentlemen, smart nerd kids from Stanford and convincing them that we're the baddest dudes on planet Earth. It makes no sense. It's the contradiction that is, great football teams that I've admired. They're, total gentlemen. Guys like Steve Wisniewski, who was a multi-time All-Pro for the Raiders. He was a GA for us. Total gentleman, the embodiment of a Christian man, if you want to, call him that, but would just eat the guts out of a dead man. And that was the mentality that Coach Harbaugh brought to us was, we're just going to beat people up. And I've run into a few guys who played at Tech or played at Cal or played at SC over the years, or Notre Dame, when we kind of piece together and figure out we played each other at the same time, and they all say the same thing, which is, God, like, getting ready for you guys, it was always extra run periods, it was always extra tackling periods. It was because we knew it was going to be a war, and to do that with a bunch of nice guy, make sure they get to class Stanford kids is just it's incredible. And I'm so proud to have been part of that, because maybe the low point of, one of the lower points of my life is I'm in my fraternity in 2006, and watching. Remember the show Jim Rome is Burning, where he had like the Chiron, and it was always, timing up as I was get back from practice, or leaving for practice, I think. And then at one day there's the Stanford logo with a football, and we're in the middle of 1-11 season at that point. I'm like, okay, what is he going to say about us? Yeah. And he gets to that segment and he goes, "This just in, the Pac-10 has announced that they're now the Pac-9.5 because Stanford's so bad." And he goes on this tirade, just watching Trent Edwards just get destroyed. Yeah. Who are these guys kidding? They think they're going to come in, and it's, these nerds need to pack it in, blah, blah. I can still hear Jim Rome saying that. And in 4 years, convince us that we were capable of doing that, and then going and doing it, shooting across the bow at SC, his first Pac-10 media day with the "We Bow to No" program speech, and that immediately, whoa, okay. And it was that attitude. You just built on it, built on it, built on it. Turley, got everything he could out of us, and we were dominating those teams 3 years later. It's still unbelievable to me. I'm still just in awe of the fact that I got to participate in something like that. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, stadium was full. You're going to the Orange Bowl, Rose Bowls. Yeah, amazing stuff. And then you talk about Wisniewski. I'll do my age here. So I played against him in the 1989 Rico Japan Bowl
Amazing.
All-Star game. How about that, right? You got to remember, I got to set the stage for you. No internet, so you don't really know who you're playing against, except, you line up and the guy's got that white Penn State helmet. And you know this, being an offensive lineman, when that linebacker has got the fit right on you, right, he's going to win, right? And I come up, I get the fit on Wisniewski, and I'm like, I got him, right? And all of a sudden, the sky goes black because that guy, of course, all pro for many years with the Raiders, just literally put me on my back. It had never been owned that bad ever. And I remember getting up saying, okay, avoid the guy with the white helmet from now on. Man, that guy was an unbelievable player.
And just to kind of talk about another edge in that area, bring Greg Roman in, you bring Chester McLaughlin in, another Raider legend, you bring, Aaron Moore, you bring, these guys who are NFL dudes, and you have them just mingling with the guys, building this culture of not just, sort of ragged, go hard toughness, but real technique behind it, and real know-how, and real commitment to the craft, and the demonstration that all those guys, put on it. I said Aaron Moorhead is what I meant, but he was a receiver coach for us and then receiver for the Colts, and won a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning.
So you finish up this great run at Stanford, and you do a couple of things, but for the last 10, you've been at LinkedIn, this social network for the business community. 200 million users, and my number's probably wrong, in the USA, I think, roughly. And I was reading another number. It said 90 job applications are submitted per minute. How did you find your way to LinkedIn? And are you going to tell me it was your LinkedIn profile that got you the job?
I actually snuck in the back door. I was part of a company that got acquired by LinkedIn. So I left Virginia, like you said, got a master's degree there, studied abroad in China, an unbelievable experience. In what was kind of a unique program at the time, the McIntyre School of Commerce at UVA had at the time a one-year master's where they basically condensed the curriculum of an MBA into 1 year. And then send you abroad for almost 2 months as part of the curriculum. So we're touring, a spice factory in Sichuan province in China. We're going to Walmart's corporate headquarters in Hong Kong. We're amazing experience. So quick shout out McIntyre School of Commerce. But get done with that. Arrive out in California, and I was going to work for a startup actually where 2 Stanford football players referred me in. So a guy named Pat Danahy, who was a tight end for us in the Walt Harris era, and then Jason Evans, who was a running back for us. I believe he graduated in 2008. But they were both working there and referred me in. The week I got married, we drove out. I'm supposed to start a job there. My wife's starting a job at Stanford Hospital as a nurse. And I think we arrived on a Saturday, and I was supposed to start the following Monday. They get acquired by Google that Friday. So I'm sitting there seeing this alert come into my phone going, okay, probably don't have a job. That's all right. But they took our starting class in. And so I was at Google for a little over a year, and then left that and followed a friend of mine actually from that company to join a company called Bizzo. And it was a professional network, professional identity, ad targeting network, basically. And they were promptly bought by LinkedIn about a year later. So thought to myself, okay, well, this is getting kind of annoying. I'd like to be in a place for a set period of time to really feel like I'm living the Silicon Valley thing and providing an impact, and thought, okay, I'll wait 3 months and like some stock vest and be out the door. And now it's been 10 years. So and some great opportunities within that 10 years. It was the second hire in our DC presence for our marketing solutions business. So ads on LinkedIn, getting to build the go-to-market and come home to DC to be able to do that. Move into an office, like, all those things. Then got to lead the state engagement. So economic development, tourism, anything that was a state focused level, do that for our business for a couple of years. And for the last 2, I've been in management, helping people figure out their careers and helping them level up. So now it's been 10 years, but it's been like 3 separate stints of fun things for 3-ish years.
Yeah, super, super creative. Now, I know Jim Harbaugh had a lot of sayings as a coach, who's got it better than us? Nobody. As we jump in and talk about your college athlete LinkedIn playbook, and again, I can't stress enough, go to LinkedIn, find Andrew Phillips, sign up for this playbook. And this playbook, again, even if you weren't a college athlete, man, it is money. Get in there and check that out. But I also noticed, and on a high level here, when we talk about this playbook, you've got a lot of those football sayings, if you will, right? So first off, you start talking about a profile, and you talk about first impressions, how important that is. But you say something along the lines of, hey, don't let perfection be your enemy in terms of your profile. Talk about that. What somebody first ought to have on their profile and what you mean by that.
Yeah, it's the mistake, I think, that is most pervasive with LinkedIn. And just to call it out, LinkedIn kind of gives people the heebie-jeebies. There's no other platform where, and I've worked at LinkedIn for 10 years. Inevitably, a couple times a month, people come up to me if I have like a LinkedIn T-shirt on or something. Somebody will come up and say, "Hey, do you work at LinkedIn, or how do you, why do you have that on?" And there are always 2 reactions. It's either one, "Oh, I love LinkedIn because it helped me get a job because I saw my cousin was connected to so and so," or it's that story. Love, awesome. The other, it's about 50% of the time, is, "Ooh, I have LinkedIn. I don't think I'm doing it right." And LinkedIn just gives people this anxiety. And I think a big part of the reason for that is by, being the social identity of record for your professional life. People think that they're anxious to do anything to exhibit personality. And in treating it like a digital resume, there's this anxiety comes with like, "Oh, well, I must be getting something wrong." And starting from that position of, "I don't think I'm doing it right," And there's this kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of really bad advice on how to use LinkedIn. And I think a lot of it starts with this idea that, like, well, if you just get your profile right, then, hey, job offers are going to start rolling in, baby, and here you go. And that's just not how it works. And to an extent, I blame LinkedIn for this in part, because I think in trying to help people establish their professional identity of record, we set the bar really high for like, well, here are the things that you need to do, and you need a headshot, and you need this, and you need to add skills, and you need to. And what I tell people is just, your profile is a tool. It is only going to be as useful as you use it, which I want to get into, because that's like the main crux. If I have anything to share LinkedIn related, is your profile is a tool. The platform is a tool. It is not a passive experience. It is something that you have to engage with and use if you're going to get any kind of utility from it. So this idea that like, oh, I just set my profile up and, or if I don't have my profile right, then I won't, get results from it. Or, oh, well, somebody told me I should add, bullet points instead of prose to it's like you get into this minutia that just does not matter in terms of what most people are looking to achieve when they're on LinkedIn. So I think most people just need to kind of get over that and do the basics. Yes, have a headshot. It's important to have a headshot. You're trying to set the footing for a positive experience with whoever's coming to your profile. Yes, give a brief description of what it is that you're doing, what you're working on, where you want to be going. Sure. Add some context to your past experiences, include your education. Yes. Once you've got that, you're in. And then you can start using it as a tool and actually putting the platform to work for you, which does require some work. But it's not complicated. And I think most people just get hung up on this thing of like, oh, the profile and the anxiety, and it's totally unnecessary and it's distracting from actually getting results from the platform.
So it gets us to our next saying. You throw in there skill versus will.
Yeah.
And you're referencing reposting things that you see, reposting things on the platform, maybe with a comment. Talk about that. Sounds like you're saying, look, don't get hung up on worrying about your comment being correct. If it's something you're interested in and it's something you feel passionate about, make a comment, get out there and swim a little bit.
For sure. No. So it's sticking with that theme of the profile and the platform are tools. The thing I stress to people, and I love a good hot take. One of my favorite icebreakers within LinkedIn, and the tech community loves a good icebreaker. One of my favorites is, what's your favorite hot take? The funniest one I've heard is brunch is overrated. A woman I work with said that one and had this whole thing about why she hates brunch. But my big hot take is you need to post content in order to really get the effects you're looking for. And in terms of, I keep saying that. What are most people looking for when they come to LinkedIn? Why would you go through the effort of doing this? Well, you're trying to make the most of your network. Yes, you're trying to digitize your network and your connections and make the most of that. Sure. But ideally, you'd like to be in an opportunity. Most people would agree with the statement, like, if opportunities just came to me, that would be a net good thing, right? Like, we're speaking on this podcast because of things that you saw that I put on LinkedIn. I didn't reach out to you and say, hey, Kevin, I'd like to, but I cannot tell you the number of times where interesting things like this have happened just because I've been posting stuff. And I'm not, I'm not anybody special. I'm not somebody who's particularly credentialed to do these things. I happen to have worked at LinkedIn for a long time, but there are this idea that like, oh, I need permission as an expert in order to speak. It's something I really fundamentally challenge. So I think everybody needs to post, but there's a crawl, walk, run hierarchy in terms of how to do this well. And if you've never posted anything on LinkedIn before, again, with this goal in mind of just being top of mind when opportunities come up to make it more likely that those things are going to come to you, repost something interesting that you see. That'd be step one. If you come across something interesting, hitting that little, it's like a little, arrow recycle button. You just hit that and you're good. Get comfortable with the notion that you're flagging to your network, hey, this is something interesting. I thought you might find it interesting too, which is essentially what you're saying when you repost something. That'd be step one. Step two would be to repost, but then add your thoughts. So, what's your unique perspective, your reaction to something? If I come across a piece on, digital marketing tactics in the financial services space, this is where my team works. I might, cite a customer. I might say, hey, I saw something similar in the campaigns of XYZ customer. I might tag in somebody that I was having a conversation with that about, just to, add to the richness of the conversation. But it's not my idea. It's just my reaction to the idea. That's step two. Step three would be completely unique thought, thought of your own, thinking out loud, even turning around and sharing something that you've just learned. Some of my favorite creators, to go back to the idea that step 1 and 2, most people don't really have a fundamental problem with. Step 3 is where you start to lose people because they go, well, I can't, how could it possibly, I'm not an expert in anything, da, da, da. And the argument I'd make is no one's really an expert. There are very few, certified true blue experts, but there's always going to be somebody, if you're defining expert as credentialed in some way or experienced in some way, even people who are experts are going to have people who know more than them. And, there's always going to be a PhD in your subject. There's always, if we're setting the standard as, well, no, nobody's allowed to talk unless they're a PhD equivalent in something, then no one should say anything. And we'd all just be worse off, right? So I think the most interesting people on LinkedIn are not necessarily the experts, even if they are credentialed experts. I think some of the most interesting people on LinkedIn and social content generally are the people who are learning out loud, who have the courage to go through something, learn it, and literally just as they're learning it, turn around to their network and say, hey, this is what I just learned. And there are so many great creators on LinkedIn and Twitter and /X where they start posts with, I just read 15 books on business leadership. Here are my top 5 takeaways. I don't know anything about whether they've got an MBA or whether they have any foot to speak on. That's an interesting tidbit, right? Like that's an interesting where you can go, okay, somebody's taken the time to read 15 leadership books. What are their top takeaways? The equivalent of that exists on LinkedIn everywhere. When you start looking for it, you start realizing, the real value being created is not by experts. It's by people who are brave enough to learn out loud. And that's what I want to encourage people to do is share what you're learning, learn out loud, start interesting conversations, and you will just be shocked on where these things go. I was speaking on a NFL Legends panel. Microsoft puts on this training cohort for former NFL players and trying to teach them, tech skills and being project managers and that kind of thing. And I said this to them. I've said this for years as I've done similar engagements. If you post regularly on LinkedIn for a year, your life will change. I don't know how. I don't know who you're going to meet. I don't know what skill you're going to pick up. I don't know what industry you're going to find yourself really interested in. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how it will, but it will, because I have seen it change. I have seen this happen dozens and dozens of times. Whether it's, I work with a group called Year Up, which is, it takes, people who have, primarily kind of marginalized backgrounds, maybe some college, some not, maybe they graduated high school, maybe they haven't, rough starts in life, and gives them a year of job training and skills, pairs them up with an internship. I have seen people go from literally living on the street, going through this program, posting regularly, sharing what they're learning, sharing their experience, to buying homes in San Francisco, which is not an easy thing to do for anybody. Yeah. I've seen that transformation happen in a matter of 2 or 3 years, combined with all the other hard work and everything that they're doing to give themselves that opportunity. But, and then I hear repeatedly from people where I go and speak, and I'll get a DM a month along the lines of, oh, I took your advice and like somebody just reached out and got an opportunity to, be on this, take this job in Seattle. That sounds like a dream job for me. Or, oh, like somebody reached out and, now I'm on a podcast speaking circuit, and that flywheel of you're on one and then you get invited to another and you get invited to another. And now I'm writing a book, and like, there are so many stories that come from this. So if you've got anxiety about posting, just get over it and jump in. You have something of value that you can share that the network will thank you for.
Well, I tell you what, my network, forever grateful for my network. And I love that my network put me in touch with you. I'm assuming we can put all your contact information in the show notes for this podcast, because I want people to reach out and sign up for the College Athletes LinkedIn Playbook. We'll go ahead and do that. That makes sense.
Please. No, that'd be great. Yeah. GetAthletePlaybook.com, aphillips71 on X, FK Twitter, or AE Phillips on LinkedIn.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. It was better than I thought it was going to be, and I had high expectations for old number 71. So thank you so much for your time. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Best thing you can give us is a follow or a share. And again, if you want to talk about finances, give us a call, 831-717-1144, or email us at krichardson@TACWealth. On behalf of Andrew Phillips, our producer, Bill Tucker, and the great people at Proudmouth, I want to say thanks for tuning in, and so long till next time.
Thank you for listening to the View from the Inside podcast with Kevin Richardson. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. To ask questions about topics covered during the show, head over to www.tacwealth.com. And don't forget to check the show notes for additional contact information. Kevin Richardson is a registered representative with and securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.